Everyone knows Dale Earnhardt. Everyone knows Daytona. But let me ask you something. When was the last time you heard the name Eric Martin? When was the last time anyone said Carlos Pardo out loud? When was the last time a single person in your life mentioned Henry Surtees, a teenager who was struck by a force 17 times more powerful than a rifle bullet and died the same day it happened? You haven't. Nobody has. And that silence, that complete, total, comfortable silence, is exactly what this video is about. Because while the sport spent years building statues and making documentaries about the names everyone already knows, these men were buried quietly and forgotten completely. No specials, no tributes, no anniversaries, just gone. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you death so brutal, so avoidable, and so criminally overlooked that, by the time this video ends, you are going to feel two things simultaneously: grief for people you never knew existed, and genuine anger at a sport that moved on from them like they never mattered. Some of these men had children waiting at home. Some were told by their own crews that they were completely fine, seconds before they were not. And one of them, and I need you to remember this because it is going to hit you much harder when we get there, one of them was officially declared the winner of the race he died in. His name went into the record books in first place. He just was not breathing when it happened. Stay with me until the end of this video. I promise you the last story is the one that is going to follow you out of here. October 9th, 2002, Charlotte, North Carolina. Lowe's Motor Speedway. The morning air was cool. The track was alive with the sound of engines running practice laps, and somewhere in that noise was Eric Martin, a 33-year-old stock car driver from Tennessee who had spent the better part of a decade doing exactly this: grinding, practicing, showing up early and leaving late. Eric wasn't famous. He wasn't chasing a championship or a sponsorship deal or a magazine cover. He was just a man who had loved racing since he was a kid and never stopped loving it. He had a wife. He had 2 children. He had a team that believed in him. And that morning, on that track, everything felt normal, routine, safe. He took his car out for practice laps ahead of the ARCA EasyCare 100 race, working through the turns, finding his rhythm, doing what racers do. Then exiting turn 4, something went wrong. His car spun. It hit the wall, hard enough to rattle him, hard enough to damage the car, but not, or so it seemed, hard enough to end anything. His crew immediately got on the radio, and Eric Martin's voice came back through the speaker, calm, steady, not panicked at all. 3 words. Just 3 words. I'm all right. His crew exhaled. His spotter relaxed. 3 words that meant everything was okay, that the day would continue, that Eric would climb out and they would check the car and figure out what happened next. Those were the last 3 words Eric Martin ever spoke, because in the seconds that followed, before a single caution light had time to flash, before any warning could reach the other drivers still running at full speed, fellow driver Deborah Renshaw came flying around that same turn, 4 at 257 kilometers per hour. She was pushing hard. She had no reason to slow down. Nobody had told her anything was wrong, because nobody had time to tell her anything at all. She came around that corner, and she saw Eric's car sitting still on the racing line, and she had absolutely no time to react. She struck his car directly on the driver's side at nearly full race speed. Eric Martin was killed instantly. The man who had just said he was all right was gone before anyone could even unbuckle a seatbelt and run to him. And now comes the part that shifts this story from tragedy into something that feels closer to a crime. ARCA's rules at that time did not require spotters to be stationed at the top of the grandstands where they could actually see the whole track. Deborah Renshaw's spotter was not up high watching the circuit. He was sitting on top of the team's own trailer in the pit area, a position from which he simply could not see what had happened in turn 4. He had no idea Eric's car was sitting there, so he said nothing. He warned nobody. Meanwhile, other drivers whose spotters happened to be better positioned did slow down. They saw the stopped car. They moved around it safely. 3 cars passed Eric Martin's wrecked vehicle without incident because their spotters could see and could communicate. Renshaw's spotter could not. 1 rule, 1 positioning requirement. That is all it would have taken. And 2 kids would still have their father. Instead, because of a gap in a rulebook that nobody had bothered to close, a man who said he was fine died alone on a racetrack while his crew stood in the pits waiting for him to come back around. Now I told you at the start that one of these men won the race he died in. I told you to hold on to that. And I need you to understand before I tell you this story that I am not going to exaggerate a single word of it. What happened to Carlos Pardo is so strange and so heartbreaking that it does not need any exaggeration at all. Carlos Alberto Pardo was not an unknown figure in his world. He was the first ever champion of the NASCAR Mexico Corona Series, winning the title in 2004 in the very first year the championship existed. 10 wins, 8 pole positions, 74 career starts. In Mexican motorsport, Carlos Pardo was as close to a legend as the sport had. He had driven in American NASCAR series as well, making starts outside of Mexico, proving he could compete at higher levels. But Mexico was his home. Mexico was where he belonged. And on June 14, 2009, at the Autodromo Miguel E. Abed, a 2.4-kilometer oval track in the city of Amozoc in the state of Puebla, Carlos Pardo was doing what legends do. He was winning. Lap 97 of 100. 3 laps from the finish. The race was his. He had led it, managed it, controlled it, and now all he had to do was hold on for 3 more laps, and the victory was going to be his. Then Jorge Goers made his move. Goers came up on Pardo, going into turn 3, pushing for the overtake, looking for the gap. Pardo moved to block him. Their cars made contact. And in an instant, everything changed. Pardo's car snapped sideways and was launched directly into the outside concrete retaining wall at over 200 kilometers per hour. Not a glancing blow, not a scrape. A full, devastating head-on impact with an unforgiving concrete barrier at race speed. The car did not simply crash. Witnesses and camera footage showed it essentially come apart on impact, pieces scattering across the track as the chassis absorbed forces it was never built to fully survive. Carlos Pardo was extracted from what remained of his car and immediately airlifted by helicopter to the nearest hospital. 45 minutes after he arrived, he was dead. The injuries from that wall impact were unsurvivable. And now, here is the part I need you to sit with for a moment. Because of the way NASCAR's official race rules work, when an accident ends a race prematurely, officials look back at the last fully completed lap before the incident occurred and determine who was leading at that point. Carlos Pardo had been leading. He had been ahead when that lap was completed. And so by every official rule in the book, Carlos Pardo was declared the race winner. His name went into the record books as the victor of that event. He beat Jorge Goers, the man whose car had just ended his life, by 44 milliseconds. 44 milliseconds. That is smaller than the time it takes to blink. That is the margin by which Carlos Pardo won the last race of his life. There was no trophy presentation. There was no victory lap. There was no champagne. There was no moment where Carlos Pardo raised his hands and felt what winning feels like. He crossed that finish line first in the records, and he was already in a helicopter, unconscious, bleeding, gone. His family heard the words race winner and funeral arrangements in the same breath. 44 milliseconds. First place. Dead. What happened to Carlos Pardo is the kind of thing that makes you question how any of this is worth it. But the next story is the kind of thing that makes you question something even deeper. Because Henry Surtees was not killed by a crash. He was not killed by a mechanical failure in his own car. He was not killed by anything he did, anything he missed, anything he could have prevented or prepared for. Henry Surtees was killed by a wheel, someone else's wheel, flying through the air. And the fact that it found him, out of everyone on that track, is the kind of thing that once you know it, you cannot unfeel. Henry Surtees was 18 years old. 18. The son of John Surtees, who is still to this day the only person in motorsport history to have won world championships on both a motorcycle and in a Formula One car. Racing was not something Henry had stumbled into. It was his inheritance, his environment, the language his family spoke. He had already shown serious promise in junior categories. He had wins. He had poles. He had a future that the people who watched him race talked about with genuine excitement. July 19, 2009, Brands Hatch Circuit in Kent, England. A Formula 2 race. Henry was running in 7th position, working through the field, doing everything right. Then, somewhere ahead of him on the circuit, a car driven by Jack Clark went offline and struck the exterior wall. The impact was violent enough to cause a wheel tether, the cable designed specifically to keep wheels attached to a car even in a crash, to fail completely. Clark's rear wheel broke free, and it did not just fall to the ground. It flew. It bounced back across the racing line at approximately 161 kilometers per hour, and it struck Henry Surtees' helmet at the precise moment his car was passing through that section of track. The wheel weighed 29 kilograms. The kinetic energy delivered to Henry's head on impact was approximately 30,000 joules. If that number means nothing to you, let me give you a comparison that will make it mean something. That impact was roughly 17 times more powerful than the muzzle energy of a bullet fired from an AR-15 rifle. Not 17% more powerful. 17 times. Henry Surtees was struck in the head by a force 17 times greater than a high-powered rifle round. He was knocked unconscious immediately and completely. His foot, still resting on the accelerator, kept the car moving forward as if nothing had happened. His hands stopped steering, his eyes closed. And his car drove on without him, traveling a short distance before striking a barrier and coming to rest with the engine at its limiter and a rear wheel still spinning helplessly. Marshals and medical staff rushed to the car. They extracted Henry and transferred him first to the on-site medical center and then by helicopter to the Royal London Hospital. He was declared brain dead later that same day. Henry Surtees died on July 19, 2009, from a head injury caused by a wheel that had absolutely nothing to do with his car, his driving, his skill, or any choice he made. He was 18 years old. He had not made a single mistake. He was simply in the wrong place at the precise wrong millisecond when physics decided to be cruel, and that was enough. I said at the beginning that these were deaths you had never heard of. I know what you are thinking right now. You are thinking that the last name on this list cannot fit that description. Because you have heard of Dale Earnhardt. Everybody has. 7 NASCAR Winston Cup championships, 76 career victories. The Intimidator. The man in the black number 3 Chevrolet who drove like he was built from the track itself. Dale Earnhardt was not an unknown driver. He was the sport. He was the face, the voice, the heartbeat of NASCAR for 2 decades. So why is he on this list? Because what I am about to tell you is something that most people who know his name do not actually know. And when you hear it, I think you are going to feel something very close to rage. February 18th, 2001, Daytona Beach, Florida. The Daytona 500. The biggest race in American motorsport, run in front of a crowd of 200,000 people at the most famous oval track in the world. Final lap. Dale Earnhardt was running in 3rd place, but he was not racing for 3rd. He was there to protect his teammates. Michael Waltrip and his own son, Dale Earnhardt Jr., were running 1st and 2nd, and Dale was behind them acting as a shield, blocking cars from getting through to challenge them, sacrificing his own finishing position so that people he loved could win. That is the kind of man he was on that final lap. Then, contact was made. Sterling Marlin's car touched Earnhardt's, and Dale's car turned sharply and hit the outside concrete wall in turn 4. Head on, full speed. The impact caused a basilar skull fracture, a break at the very base of the skull, the kind of catastrophic injury that occurs when the head snaps violently forward in a crash and strikes something solid and immovable. His restraint system, under the forces of that impact, failed to hold him completely in place. His head struck the steering wheel. The wheel was reportedly bent by the force of the collision. He was pronounced dead at the Halifax Medical Center at 5:16 in the afternoon. His cause of death was confirmed as a basilar skull fracture. And now I need you to really listen to what I am about to say. In 2001, there existed a piece of safety equipment called the HANDS device, the head and neck safety system. It had been developed specifically for motorsport. It sits across the driver's shoulders and connects to the helmet, and its entire purpose is to prevent the head from snapping forward violently during a crash, which is exactly the mechanism that caused Dale Earnhardt's fatal injury. The device was not experimental in 2001. It was not untested. It was available. It was used by some drivers already, and the overwhelming consensus among the safety experts and biomechanical analysts who studied Earnhardt's crash in the days and weeks that followed is that had he been wearing a HANDS device, it would almost certainly have saved his life. Dale Earnhardt knew about the HANDS device. He had tried it, and he refused to wear it. He said it was uncomfortable. He said it felt too restrictive. He did not like how it limited his movement, and he did not want to race with it on. And in 2001, NASCAR did not require him to. It was optional, so he made his choice and he raced without it. On the final lap of the Daytona 500, while his son was about to finish 2nd and his teammate was about to win, Dale Earnhardt hit a wall and died from the exact injury that device was designed to prevent. After his death, NASCAR made the HANDS device mandatory for all competitors, not before. After. The rule came after the funeral. The requirement came after the coffin was closed. And that is the detail that does not let you go. Because the device existed, the danger was known, the protection was available, and the choice was made to keep it optional until the most famous driver in the sport was dead. His son finished 2nd that day. Michael Waltrip won. They were celebrating when the news came through. Think about what that moment felt like. Think about crossing a finish line and raising your arms, and then learning that the man who put you in that car, who protected you on that final lap, who gave everything he had so that you could win, was gone. Eric Martin told his crew he was all right. He was not. Carlos Pardo was declared the winner of his last race and was not alive to know it. Henry Surtees was struck by a force 17 times stronger than a rifle round and had done absolutely nothing wrong, and Dale Earnhardt died from an injury that a device already sitting in a garage somewhere could have prevented. 4 men, 4 different tracks, 4 different decades, 4 deaths that did not have to happen exactly the way they did. Not one of these men walked onto a racetrack expecting that day to be the last one. Not one of them said goodbye knowing it was goodbye. They were racers. They believed in the sport. They trusted the systems around them to keep them safe. And in each case, in a different way, those systems were not enough. If you felt something watching this video, if any of these names are going to stay with you, then do one thing. Share this. Put it somewhere someone else will see it. Because the only thing worse than a life cut short is a life that goes unremembered. These men raced. They competed. They loved what they did. The least we can do is say their names.